A rust-streaked shipping container sits on the deck of a civilian freighter. No warship, no launch rail, no flag on the hull. Then the lid blows off. 4 cruise missiles stand up, ignite, and streak for the horizon. That freighter just became a warship. If you've seen the headlines about America running low on missiles and wondered what the fix looks like, here it is. That container costs less than a luxury car per round. For 40 years, America built a few exquisite, expensive weapons, each one a masterpiece. Now the Pentagon's betting the other way. 10,000 cheap missiles in 3 years. And the twist? That's not America's idea. It's China's playbook. I'll show you why the side that mocked cheap mass is now buying it by the thousand. Strap in. The chessboard just moved. Before we get to the missiles, you need 3 things on the map. First, the distance. A war over Taiwan isn't fought from California. It's fought across thousands of miles of open ocean, where every American ship and base sits inside China's missile umbrella. Range and resupply favor Beijing. They fight at home. We fight at the end of a very long rope. Second, the math. I've sat through enough Pacific War games to know how they end. The US side burns through its long-range missiles in about 3 weeks, then keeps fighting a war it can no longer shoot. The arsenal runs dry before the enemy does. Third, the timing. Why now? Because the cupboard's already thinner than anyone likes. The campaign against Iran chewed through hundreds of Tomahawks in a single month. Each one takes years to build back. So the Pentagon ran the arithmetic and didn't like the answer staring back. That's the stage. A fight where whoever runs out of ammunition first loses. But the real argument isn't how many missiles. It's what kind. 2 camps put 2 very different bets on the table. Here's the split. The first camp calls it affordable mass. Their argument is simple. In a Pacific fight, volume is its own kind of quality. Flood the zone with cheap missiles, and you force the enemy to burn million-dollar interceptors on $100,000 threats. That's the cost imposition game. Make every shot they take a losing trade. Pentagon leaders frame it as filling the magazine before the magazine runs dry. The second camp isn't buying it, and their case isn't weak. Cheap usually means short-legged, slow, and easy to jam. A subsonic missile with a few hundred miles of reach can't touch the targets that decide a Pacific war. You get what you pay for. Quantity without quality, they warn, is just a bigger pile of things that get shot down. So who's right? Here's my honest read. Both are, partly. The cheap mass crowd is solving the magazine problem. The skeptics are right. You can't build the whole arsenal this way. The gap between those 2 bets is exactly where this video lives. But claims don't win wars. The iron does. Now look at what's actually walking into the room. Its name is Barracuda, the 500M, built by Anvil. Think of it as a hyperscaled Tomahawk, stripped of everything that made the Tomahawk expensive. Start with the engine. 1 small turbojet. Not a fancy one. The kind of motor you stamp out on a commercial line, fast and by the thousand. That's the whole point. Cheap to build means easy to replace. But here's the trade-off, and it's real. A turbojet is subsonic. Barracuda cruises under the speed of sound, with a few hundred miles of reach. It's no scalpel. Here's why that matters, and where it gets clever. You don't fire 1, you fire 40. Tomahawk is the scalpel. Barracuda is the swarm. Now the part that changes the game. It's containerized. No warship. No dedicated launcher. The missile ships and fires from a standard cargo box. Bolt a booster on. Drop it on a flatbed truck, a barge, a pier. Any truck becomes a battery. Any port becomes an arsenal. I've watched enough programs promise cheap and deliver gold-plated to stay skeptical. This one's different in the way that counts. The Pentagon isn't buying 1 design. It signed 4 companies to build over 10,000 of these in 3 years. Anvil alone is on the hook for 1,000 a year. That's not a weapon. That's a production line aimed at a war. But hardware is only half the move. And the second piece is the one nobody's ready for. Here's what wasn't in the press release. Cheap mass isn't just slow and subsonic. It's climbing to the top of the ladder too. Meet Blackbeard. It's a hypersonic missile, Mach 5 and up, built by a company that barely existed a few years ago. And it's being built the Barracuda way. Not a boutique masterpiece. A low-cost weapon meant to roll off a line by the hundred. The Navy just put money down on the first 50. Stop and sit with that. Hypersonic used to mean rare and ruinously expensive. The whole point of Blackbeard is to make speed cheap. But the missile isn't even the twist. Look at what fires it. A ship called Marauder, 180 feet, carrying 150 tons of payload. And it has no crew. Nobody aboard. It's a robot. For the first time, the plan is to launch a hypersonic missile from an unmanned ship. Here's why that matters. The launcher itself is now cheap and expendable. You don't risk a billion-dollar destroyer and 300 sailors to take a shot. You send a robot boat to the edge of the fight and fire from a spot the enemy never mapped. We war-gamed distributed launch for years. The blue team always liked having more shooters the other side couldn't find. Now stack it together. Cheap missiles to flood the zone. Cheap hypersonics to punch through. Crewless boats to fire from everywhere at once. That's not one weapon. That's a doctrine. And doctrine, not hardware, moves the board. Now look at the chessboard. Start with the money, because money is the whole game here. A cheap cruise missile runs a couple $100,000. The interceptor that stops it can cost 10 times that. Think about what that does to the math. Every time the enemy knocks one of your missiles down, they spend more than you did to send it. Run that 1,000 times, and somebody's economy blinks first. That's cost imposition. You're not trying to win every exchange. You're trying to make every exchange a bad trade for the other guy. Now the depth problem. The war game burned 5,000 missiles in 3 weeks. An arsenal that deep, built over 3 years, doesn't just refill the shelf. It changes what a planner is willing to do, because he's no longer rationing his last shots. Here's the uncomfortable mirror. America's racing to close a gap China built on purpose. Beijing spent 2 decades turning shipyards and factories into the deepest magazine on Earth. And let's be clear, that's not a Chinese people problem. It's a leadership class that chose mass production as a weapon. Washington's finally answering in the same language. So where does this go? 3 roads. Most likely, a quiet race in volume. Both sides stack cheap missiles by the thousand, and deterrence holds on raw inventory. Downhill. Cheap mass makes a first strike look survivable, and somebody miscalculates because the missiles feel expendable. The off-ramp, the cost of saturating each other drags both sides back to the table, because nobody can afford to keep trading. Which road we take depends on choices being made right now, and those choices won't all be made by the same people. My read, and this is one analyst's call after 30 years of watching plays like this. Cheap mass is the right move, and it's overdue. But it's no magic bullet. The country that wins won't have the cheapest missile. It'll be the one that builds them fastest and never stops. Anvil math. When the cost curve crosses the capability curve, the doctrine has to bend or break. For 40 years, America bet on capability. It just blinked and crossed over to cost. So watch the factories, not the fireworks. Watch whether those missile promises actually come off the line, because a contract isn't a stockpile. Here's my question for you. Is cheap mass real deterrence, or just a cheaper way to run out of ammunition? Best answer gets pinned. The question of the day is already up top. If this sharpened your read, do me one favor. Like it, subscribe, hit the bell. It's how this channel keeps fighting above its weight. I'm Anvil, signing off from Theater Zero.